When KKK members land in prison, things don't always go the way they expect, like this former Klansman who walked in proud and walked out questioning everything. Number 6. Thomas Terrence. Thomas Terrence was once a proud member of the Ku Klux Klan. Raised in Alabama during the Civil Rights era, he was drawn to extremist ideas and joined the White Knights, one of the most violent branches of the Klan at the time.
I grew up in the Deep South, Mobile, Alabama in the 60s, came of age in the early 60s, and been raised in church, very regular, I would say, and a good Bible-believing church and all the rest. Baptized when I was 13, but not converted. Didn't know it, though. And when I was about 17, the desegregation began, and
by his early 20s, he was fully radicalized. He hated black people, Jews, and anyone who didn't fit into his narrow worldview. He helped carry out several attacks, including a failed bombing on the home of a Jewish civil rights leader in Mississippi. But that night in 1968 didn't go as planned. Authorities had been tipped off. As Terrence approached the house with explosives, police opened fire. He was shot several times and arrested on the spot. He survived, but was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Not long after, he tried to escape with help from another Klan member. The accomplice was killed during the attempt, and Terrence was caught and placed in solitary confinement.
But what is true is that Thomas Terrence III ran one of the most successful terrorist cells in all North American history. Tom Terrence was at a school in Alabama, in Southern America, which was the first school in America to be desegregated. And they took black American children and put them on buses and bussed them into his school. And he saw them arrive, and he was angry about it. And he became increasingly angry about it. He felt it was wrong, and it violated the natural order of things. So he was attracted to join an organization called the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. Some of you may have heard of them. But he didn't like the Ku Klux Klan because he felt they were a bit too liberal. The trouble with the Ku Klux Klan is they said a lot of talk but not a lot of action. So then he found a group called the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
In that isolation, something changed. He kept reading, first far-right books, then philosophy, and eventually the Bible. What started as boredom became something deeper. Slowly, the hate began to break down. Over time, he let go of the beliefs he once fought for. After serving just 8 years, Terrence was released through a work release program. He didn't go back to his old life. He went to school, got degrees, and became a pastor. In a strange twist, the man who once bombed homes now leads an interracial church and works to bridge racial divides. Number 5. Frank Meeink. Frank Meeink grew up in South Philadelphia, surrounded by violence, anger, and instability. By age 13, he'd already been drawn into the world of neo-Nazism. It gave him a sense of power and control, something he lacked at home. By 18, he was deep in the movement, not just as a follower, but as a recruiter.
And then we would go there and hang out, and it sounds kind of creepy now because I'm 35, I say we hung out at high school, but I was 17 years old, so I kind of fit right in except for the tattoos. And what we do is we start hanging out with the alternative kids, not that alternative kids like skaters and punk rockers are racist. Actually, a lot of them are not anti-racist, but these group of kids, they kind of hung out at this parking lot outside of school, and they kind of were picked on a little bit. So I remember these Maine kids threw a battery at them, like the jock kids one day, and I was there. So I went over to the jock kids, and these pretty big kids, big football players, and I went over to them and just said, hey, who threw it? And you gotta know at that time in my life, and if you read in the book, I mean, I'm homicidal or suicidal on any given day, whatever which way the pendulum goes. Well.
But things escalated fast, and at 17, he kidnapped a man at gunpoint, recorded the attack, and nearly killed someone else. He was arrested, tried as an adult, and sentenced to 3 years in prison. That was supposed to be the end of his story, or so everyone thought. Prison, however, didn't harden him further. It cracked him open. Inside, he met men from backgrounds he'd always hated. On the basketball court and football field, those labels disappeared, bonds formed, respect grew, and the same people he'd been taught to despise were now treating him better than his own. He tried returning to his old life when he got out, but something had shifted. The hate didn't feel the same. It didn't hold him anymore. Then came a job with a Jewish antique dealer who showed him basic kindness and dignity. That broke something in him, the final piece of a belief system that was already falling apart.
You first kind of came across the ideas of neo-Nazism when you were around 13, but give people a sense of your life up until that point.
Yeah, up until that point, until I was about 10, I had maybe until I was about 9, I had a pretty good life. Single mom, we struggled, we were on welfare, and I remember being embarrassed of having food stamps as a kid, but other than that, I was pretty happy-go-lucky. My mom got remarried, an abusive drunk man came into our home and was not a pretty picture, and I got shipped off to go live with my dad in another neighborhood in Philadelphia, and it's a pretty rough neighborhood. It's actually like a Fresh Prince type neighborhood up in that area, so West Philly, Southwest Philly, and as Fresh Prince talks, he moved out, and my white butt moved in.
A DNA test showed he had Jewish ancestry. It wasn't just ironic, it was life-changing. Frank started learning about Judaism. He prayed, he kept kosher, he found peace in what he'd once mocked. Now he speaks out, not as a preacher, but as proof that hate can be unlearned. During an interview on CNN, Meeink said, "Fox News has completely radicalized so many Americans. If you look at Fox News and then you compare that to the hate radio from Rwanda and what started that civil war, there are comparisons there. As a former radical, I can tell you, from watching Fox News all day, I can show you where they're saying radical stuff that I used to say. Instead of when I would say Jews, they say big media. They just swapped out a couple of words here and there." Number 4. Edgar Ray Killen. Edgar Ray Killen was a preacher and a Klan leader. In the 1960s, he used his position and influence to push a racist agenda, but his most infamous act came in 1964, when he helped people plan the killing of 3 civil rights activists in Mississippi.
The defendant is present. Ms. Vaughn, you still the forelady of the jury. And Ms. Vaughn, has the jury unanimously agreed to a verdict?
Yes, sir.
And have you unanimously agreed?
Killen didn't act alone. He worked with a group of Klansmen to track and ambush the activists: James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner. The goal was to scare off civil rights groups. Instead, the 3 young men were murdered and buried in an earthen dam. Killen was questioned but walked free. For decades, he thought he'd escaped justice. Then, in 2005, everything changed. Killen, now 80 years old, was finally brought back to court. This time, the jury didn't let him off. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 60 years in prison. Inside the prison, something unusual happened. Killen shared a cell with James Hart Stern, a black preacher from California. Over time, the two talked. Stern later claimed that Killen confessed not just to the Mississippi murders, but to other crimes too.
He started telling me some incredible stuff, and I'm like, whoa. I says, do anybody know this? He says, no. He says, I've held these secrets for 45 years at the time, something like 45 years. And I says, so why are you opening up now? He said, well, he says, the right thing to do.
Did he ever admit to you any crimes that he committed that no one knows about?
32 cold cases of murders that he personally participated in. He personally performed himself, yes.
But it isn't his written document.
Oh, it's in his, he wrote it down himself. You have to understand, there's absolutely nothing I can offer anyone that he didn't himself write down. This is not James Stern's story. This is Edgar Ray actually coming forth for the first time.
He said Killen even gave him power of attorney. With that authority, Stern took ownership of Killen's land in Mississippi. He donated it to a non-profit focused on racial healing. Part of it would be turned into a memorial for the victims. Killen never got out. He died in prison in 2018. But, in the end, a piece of the land where he once preached hate was now used to honor the people he tried to silence. Number 3. James Alexander McWhirter. James McWhirter was a well-known white supremacist in Canada during the 1970s and 1980s. As a teenager, he got involved in far-right politics, joining the Western Guard at 16. The same year, he met Wolfgang Droege, another future extremist, and together, they became active in pushing racist ideologies.
Why all the secrecy? Why won't you take off your hood and show me who you are? Oh, mainly because you have a lot of radicals out there. They get sucked into things very easily. And if say some commie came down the street and says, here, I'll give you $20, go over there and do it to that guy there because I've seen his face, they'll do it.
McWhirter's involvement grew quickly, and by the late 70s, he'd linked up with American Klan leader David Duke and was working to build the Ku Klux Klan's presence in Canada. In 1978, he and another man were caught distributing hate literature in Toronto, which led to their arrest. McWhirter didn't stop. He later became the Grand Wizard of the Canadian Klan. He was also involved in Operation Red Dog, a failed attempt to overthrow the government of Dominica using a group of far-right mercenaries. In 1981, McWhirter was arrested for the coup plot and sentenced to 2 years in prison. But it didn't end there. A few years later, he was convicted again, this time for conspiring to kill a fellow Klansman. That charge earned him more time behind bars. He wasn't released until 1989.
New Orleans television station WVUE shot footage of 10 people arrested in that city last week. All of them were heavily armed and apparently planned to leave this country soon on an invasion of the Dominican Republic. It is still not known who was behind the attempted coup. But federal agents say there was someone chosen to head the country's government if the invasion was successful. Along with the men arrested, agents seized a large quantity of arms, ammunition, and explosives. In looking at the footage of the men who were arrested, I tried to see if any of them matched with men I had seen in the Ku Klux Klan Special Forces training camp story that we did last year. I saw 2 men who looked similar. But I cannot be certain because many of the Klansmen in the Special Forces training camp near Cullman had painted their faces as a disguise. And some even wore total face masks so that we could never identify them at some later date. Terry Tucker, a former Army Special Forces soldier, trained the men for the Klan and told federal authorities that 26 men meet every month at that camp near Cullman, Alabama. The agents allegedly have established that at least 3 of the commandos arrested last week in New Orleans are associated with Tucker. This is Tucker as he put his men through guerrilla training. It has also been learned that 6 members of the Klan guerrilla force in Alabama have been served subpoenas. But Alabama KKK Grand Dragon Roger Handley said
after prison, McWhirter quietly left the white supremacist movement. He turned down invites to rejoin and kept a low profile. Instead, he moved into the world of finance and even wrote a book on wealth building. In 2009, he gave an interview saying he regretted his past, claiming, "I was a different person 25 years ago. I've learned something important over the years since 1980, that I couldn't change my past, but I could change." Number 2. George Mulvaney. Michael Mulvaney grew up in Mississippi and joined the US Navy at 18. When stationed in Virginia, he got involved with the Ku Klux Klan. By 19, he wasn't just a member, he was leading a Klan cell on his ship.
10 men were arrested at a marina near New Orleans. Armed with dynamite and other weapons, officials say they plan to head 2,000 miles east-southeast of New Orleans to the Caribbean Republic of Dominica. There, they would attempt to invade and overthrow the island's government. Authorities say there are indications the men were working for someone.
It is safe to say that the people that were leaving here last night felt that they did have sufficient contacts on the island.
His military career didn't last. The Navy discharged him after discovering his Klan activities. Back on civilian soil, Mulvaney joined a failed attempt to overthrow the government of Dominica. It was called the Bayou of Pigs, and it ended in arrests. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Prison was the turning point. Inside, he was surrounded by people from all backgrounds. For the first time, he had to see the world through someone else's eyes. He started by helping other inmates, especially black prisoners, by writing letters home for them. The walls he'd built in his mind started to come down. He knew he couldn't return to his old life when he got out. He went back to school, got a job with Mississippi's Department of Environmental Quality, and eventually worked his way up to executive roles. He co-founded an environmental firm and built a career far removed from his past.
Including someone that they could place into power if the coup was successful.
Officials seized an arsenal of weapons, including high-powered rifles and 20 sticks of dynamite. It's a result of a 3-month undercover operation in which agents posed as seamen to gain information about the attempted coup. The arrested men are charged with violating the Neutrality Act and several weapons violations. Bond is set at $500,000 for 9 men and $100,000 for the 10th. There is still a web of mystery behind the scheme. Questions remain unanswered. Who were the men working for? What was the motive? Federal officials will attempt to answer these and other questions in a further investigation. In New Orleans, Louisiana, Mary Lou McCall for ABC News.
In his memoir, he doesn't run from what he did. He owned it. He says he wrote the book to show that people can change, that they're not stuck with who they used to be. For Mulvaney, transformation wasn't quick or easy, but it was real, and it started the day he stopped lying to himself. Number 1. Scott Shepherd. Scott Shepherd was once one of the top leaders of the Ku Klux Klan. He joined at 16, worked his way up, and spent years pushing supremacist beliefs. He wasn't just in the Klan, he led groups like the White Citizens Council and even considered running for governor of Tennessee to spread his ideas further.
It's really hard to understand and explain, but it wasn't. They got into the Jewish issue also. The Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups are very anti-Jewish. I never got into that. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I really didn't understand it. I mean, it was around me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to soften and make things look, less evil on myself, because I was right there with these people. I cheered them on. I said the things also. I'm just as guilty as they are. But, I believe in the anti-Jewish stuff.
But in 1990, things started to shift. He was arrested for drunk driving and illegal gun possession. Instead of jail, he was sent to rehab. That's when everything changed. Inside, he met people from all backgrounds: black, Jewish, and gay, people he used to hate. But they weren't what he'd imagined. They were kind, they listened, they challenged him. One moment stood out. A black man joked about joining the KKK. It was disarming. They talked. Shepherd started to see people, not labels. Later, his own daughter got married and didn't invite him. She was scared of who he was. Around the same time, his sister was dying. She told him to do something good with his life. That stuck.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know, I really don't. At that time, I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I didn't like myself, and I had all those internal issues within myself. But the Klan was there, and of course I went to the Imperial Wizard's house and knocked on the door. I remember being very nervous. And he came to the door, let me in, and we kind of talked about the Klan, and he explained me a lot about it, but there was things that he left out.
He walked away from hate and started talking about his past. Schools, colleges, public events. He teamed up with Daryl Davis, a black musician known for changing the minds of Klansmen. Shepherd even apologized to Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King, acknowledging the harm caused by his past actions and expressing remorse for his previous beliefs. Now he spends his days speaking out against racism, using his old life to warn others. He's proof that people can change even after a lifetime of hate. What do you think drives the power of change the largest? Is it remorse, guilt, religion, or just a change of perspective? If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video.